Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 8th Annual UAGC Early Childhood Conference. You're here for a great session, Backward Design, Lesson Planning for a Pathway Towards Learning Goals with Cindy Terebush. She's an associate faculty member here at UAGC and does a fantastic job for us. She's been here since 2019. She is also a subject matter expert for the Institution for Families at the School of Social Work at Rutgers University. Cindy is an early childhood specialist, consultant, and the author of Teach the Whole Preschooler, Strategies for Nurturing Developing Minds. She's the co-host of the podcast, How Preschool Teachers Do It, and she is a sought-after professional development facilitator and keynote speaker nationwide. And after you watch this session, you will know why. She is amazing. All right, on the screen, we kindly request your attention for a brief moment. In the spirit of transparency and utmost respect for our community, we have some information we'd like to share with you. By taking a few moments to read this disclaimer, you empower yourself with important information regarding the boundaries of our learning time together. All right, we have one more disclaimer screen here that we would like you to take a moment. Then together we will embark upon some exciting topics in early childhood education. And Cindy, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be talking to everyone about backward design because it impacts how we plan activities for young children. If we're going to talk about how we plan activities for the children, we have to be on the same definition of curriculum together. The National Association for the Education of Young Children, otherwise known as NAEYC, helps us to understand what a curriculum, especially an early childhood curriculum, needs to include. According to NAEYC, curriculum is, quote, the knowledge, skills, abilities, and understandings children are to acquire, and the plans for learning experiences through which those gains will occur, unquote. The definition of curriculum has basically two parts, before the and after the and. So let's think about before the and. Before the and, the definition says the knowledge, skills, and abilities and understandings children are to acquire, which means the curriculum needs to include the goals for our teaching. You might call them the standards, the objectives, the goals. It's where we want to take the children to. What skills would we like them to acquire? And then after the and, it says the plans for learning experiences through which those gains will occur. So it's not enough to only know the objectives and goals in a curriculum. We have to figure out what path are we taking the children on. There are certain things that teachers need to know in order to effectively plan activities and an overall curriculum for the children. So here are some things that the teachers need to know. Teachers need to know the goals we are helping children reach toward. Where do we want the children to go? Now, they don't necessarily reach every milestone or goal. They may still be working on it in the time that they know us, but we need to know where the journey leads to. Education is a pathway and a journey. We have to know where they're trying to end up or where we're trying to help them end up. This is sort of like when we use our GPS. Imagine that you get in your car and you sit down and you don't tell the GPS where you want to go. You don't put any destination in there. What will happen? You're going to go nowhere. The GPS is not going to take you anywhere because it doesn't know where you want to end up. It doesn't understand what pathway to take you on. So you might randomly drive somewhere, but the GPS can't tell you what way to go unless it knows where you aim to end up. Teachers also need to know the pathways to help the children move toward those goals. And that's really our job as early education teachers, is to figure out what pathway each individual child needs in order to move toward the goals. Children come to us with a basic structure. And that structure includes their experiences prior to knowing us, their culture, their family context, their biology, what have they inherited. So they come to us with this basic structure, each one of them very individual, and each one of them needing their own pathway to learning. Teachers also need to know what are the children's current abilities, needs, and approaches to learning and interests of the individual children. Who are they as individuals and what can they already do? And we're going to go back to the analogy of the GPS. This also speaks to how your GPS works. Imagine you get in your vehicle and the GPS can't find you. Many of us have experienced that. You sit down, you put an address in, you have the goal, you know where you want to go, and the GPS just does that scary swirling thing in the middle of the screen, and it's not telling you how to get there. When it's doing that scary swirling thing in the middle of the screen and not telling you how to get there, it's because it can't find you. It doesn't know where you are right now at this minute. And that can change all the time. Your car might be parked at home today, at work tomorrow, at the store another day. The GPS needs to know where you are right now. Educating young children works very much the same way. I need to know two very important things. I need to know, first, where am I trying to take you to? What is the goal or the objective or the standard? And where are you right now? It's important to know where they are right now because that will tell you the pathway to help them move toward those goals. You might have children who are very different from each other and in different places of their knowledge, skills, and understandings right now, and they need two different pathways. You may have children who are similar and can move along the same pathway with your individualized help, but you have to figure out, where are we going and where are you right now, which means you need to be observing children and taking documentation of that to figure that out. When we talk about backward design and the pathway, there are certain steps that we need to take. And step one was identifying what children should be practicing, know, or be able to do by the end of a learning cycle. Knowing what they should be practicing, knowing, or able to do by the end of the learning cycle needs to come from research-based tools. It can be your state standards. It can be other research-based tools that early childhood programs in schools purchase. For example, two popular ones are Teaching Strategies Gold and HighScope's Core Advantage. But if your program can't afford to purchase those tools, state standards are out there for you for free, and you need to get to know them. I'm continually surprised when I work with people in the workforce, how many people have never seen the state standards. If you don't know the standards, if you don't know what they say about where children are typically at different ages, then we don't know where they're supposed to end up. Not every child will be within that range of where children are typically at a particular age, but it's also important to know who might be a little behind the widely held expectations and who might be a little ahead of the widely held expectations. You know, that child who's a little behind the widely held expectations needs help in ways that are different than children who are within what we expect them to be doing at particular ages. And the children who are ahead of the expectations also have particular needs for learning. Sometimes we expect children to continue practicing skills beyond the time when they are in one particular class, because learning is a long process that requires repetition and practice. They don't master one step of learning a skill after another step rapidly. And I think it's safe to say that some of the skills that we work on with young children are things that we're going to work on for our whole lives. For example, I don't know about you, but I am still learning at my age to do things like manage my feelings, interact with peers, form friendships. I still work on math. Math does not come so easily to me, and I am nobody without a calculator. Some of these skills children are going to continue to head for their whole life. But we have to know within particular learning cycles what is typical development and where in that range or beyond or before that range are the children right in front of us. Again, it's like the car and the GPS. If the satellite can't find you, it won't know how to take you. And if we can't find where the children are right now, we won't know how to take them. The second step of backward design, after identifying what children should be practicing, know, and or be able to do by the end of a learning cycle, the second step is decide how having met that goal will be assessed. The goals and objectives for children's learning should be observable and measurable. They have to be very specific. When we're writing lesson plans, we often call these the objectives. And objectives should always be worded by what the children will be able to do after this lesson. Not what the teacher hopes they will do, not what we would like them to do, but what should we see the children able to do. I was working with a teacher who was writing objectives in her lesson plans for her class, and they were not specific. And one of the lessons that she was teaching had counting. She was going to take out Legos, encourage the children to build and count. And her objective said that by the end of the lesson, the children would be able to count the Legos she used. But that doesn't tell me enough information. How many do you want them to count? Up to what number? Are they counting in correct order? Are they counting with a certain number of missteps or errors? So we refined her objective to say that by the end of the lesson, the children would be able to successfully count 6 Legos. That's something that I can observe and I can measure. I want to give you another example having to do with literacy. A teacher was working with children on writing the first letter of their name. We always start literacy with their names because their names are so important to them. So she's working with individual children on writing the first letter in their name. And her objective was that by the end of the week, she was going to work on this over a number of days. By the end of the week, the children will all write the first letter of their name correctly. And we had to have a discussion about whether that is realistic. Will all the children actually be able to write the letter correctly? We talked about their skill levels. We talked about the abilities of the different children. And what she realized was that she had to change her objective. And she ended up with an objective that said, by the end of the week, approximately, I think she said 5 of the children, and she named them in her objective, will be able to write the first letter in their name correctly. The other children will still practice, something like that. We needed something that was observable and measurable, because you have to know specifically for each child when the goal was met and how it was met. So we had step 1, identify what children should be practicing, know, and or be able to do by the end of a learning cycle. Step 2, decide on how having met that goal will be assessed. How will you know they've met it? And step 3, plan activities that will provide children with practice and move them toward the goal. On the slide, it says step 3 is plan activities. For a long time in early education, planning activities was the first step that people took in planning for children's learning. It is not the first step. It is never the first step, because you won't know where they're going and you won't know how you'll know if they got there. We have to be sure to do some detective work that we're going to talk about later in this presentation, so that our plans actually connect to individual children. When we do something like go online and grab a plan that happens to match the theme or teaching topic of the week, that has very little to do with the actual children in front of us. We need to use this backward design, where we start with the goal. We think about how will we know when they met it, and then we decide what activities would work for the different children. If people have spent years starting with, I'm going to pick out a plan, I'm going to pick out an activity that matches my teaching topic, it can feel very strange to them to use this backward design process. But I'm going to propose to you that you and I, as adults, use backward design in everyday life. On the screen, there is an image of a sports car, because the first thing I thought of when I thought about when do we use backward design in real life was the last time that I bought a vehicle, last time I bought a car. And no, I didn't buy a sports car. I bought an SUV, but I went through the same backward design process as I'm describing to you. I had to think to myself first, I want to buy a car. I need to put aside X amount of money for my down payment. I will know when I met that goal of getting a car because I will have that money. I will try and save the money and then I figure out the path to save it. So I've started with a goal. I want to buy that car and I need X amount of money. And then I thought about, where am I right now? How much money do I have? And how much do I have to save? Then I determine a path to save it to get me to the goal. Buying a car is only one example of how we use backward design in our everyday life. We use backward design when we're planning a vacation. Where do I want to go? You decide where you want to end up. You know where you're starting, where you are, and how much money you have, and you have to decide how to get there. I have cousins who live on the opposite coast from me. When I wanted to visit them, I knew I wanted to go to the Portland area. I knew that I had to figure out from where I am right now, how am I getting there? And that was going to be an airplane. So I had to figure out, what did I need? What pathway did I need to take in order to get myself on that airplane? How was I going to buy a ticket? What was I going to bring? That was the pathway of getting where I wanted to go. I'm sure many of you can think of things that you have planned knowing the goal, and then you have to figure out the path to getting there from where you are right now. So backward design is really not foreign to us. Again, we do it every day. We just don't necessarily think about the fact that we're doing that. Unfortunately, we have not always done that when we're working on reaching goals with young children. So we're going to start. I'm going to get you on that pathway, your own pathway of learning, where your goal is to learn to plan using backward design. And you may be starting where you have never done that before. So let's take you on an educational pathway so that you understand exactly what every step looks like in the assessment and planning cycle. The assessment and planning cycle goes in a circle that never ends, because we're constantly assessing where the children are in their current knowledge, skills, understandings, and abilities, so that we can plan activities that will actually build the skills we need to work on with them. The assessment planning cycle starts, again, not with the plan. It starts with collecting information. So first we collect information about the children. Then we're going to have to reflect on that information and decide, what does that mean? The information that I've collected, what does that tell me about where the child is today? Then we're going to use that information to plan. And again, planning is step 3. Just like in the prior slide, planning is step 3. And then after we plan, we respond, which is implementing the plan. And when we implement the plan, we start the cycle all over again by collecting information about how the child is doing it. So let's think about all of these individual steps, starting with collecting information. On the slide that is about collecting information, there is an image of a magnifying glass, because what we're doing is being like educational detectives. We are observing children's actions and interactions to decide two things. What is the child able to do right now? And what skills am I observing based on the standards or the objectives or the goals used by my school or program? So, what is the child able to do right now? In order to collect useful information about young children, we have to document what they are doing, not what they're not doing. We need to know what they are doing in order to figure out what's the next step in the path. When we collect information that tells us what the child is not doing, for example, if you write down the child did not interact with anyone, that's where the observation ends. And it doesn't tell me where to go. If I write down that the child did not interact because the child continued to play with the doll for 10 minutes, now I know something about their attention to task, that the child could pay attention to that doll for 10 minutes. So we want to be careful, and we want to write down what they did do, what they showed us, and what they were able to do. And in order to collect useful information, your collection of data about the children has to relate to the goals. I can't just say something like, he painted a picture of a person. Nowhere in the standards does it say a child must paint a picture of a person. The standards tell us things like how the child should be holding something they're painting with for fine motor skills. The standards tell us things like how long children typically can attend to that task. So when I'm observing the child painting, it isn't about the painting. It's about how long and what physical, cognitive, social, emotional, or language skills did the child use while they were doing this. I want to talk for a minute about different sorts of collections of information, because people often get kind of boxed in to one kind of collection, but information collections can be many things. They can be notes that you take as you go along. And I've seen people set up their spaces so that they're very accessible, the items to take notes, so that it's very easy for them to grab some paper and something to write with in order to take notes. I've worked with teachers who hang clipboards around the room so that any adult in the room can grab a clipboard and jot down a note from wherever they are very easily. They don't have to go running and looking for the paper. I've seen people put index cards around the room so that you can quickly grab an index card and write a note, and then they're collected at the end of the day. I've also seen people keep paper or sticky notes in their pockets so that they can pull those out and make a quick note. Above all else, don't depend on your memory. We give our memories way too much credit. Have you ever gotten up in the morning, written a shopping list, and then gone to the supermarket without your list? I think we've all experienced that. Do you or do you not stand in the middle of the aisle, desperately trying to remember your list, sure that you're forgetting something, and you probably are? Well, you didn't retain the details in your memory, because the way our brains work is that our memory is constantly filtering out what it thinks we don't need, because there's a limited amount of space in working and long-term memory. So knowing there's a limited amount of space, the brain figures out, what are we keeping here? What are we not keeping here? And that's why many details kind of fall out of our brains. And we go to the supermarket desperately trying to remember this list, but you can't, because your brain knew you wrote a list, and every time you write a list, you don't need to remember the details. We're observing children all the time in environments that pull our attention in 1,000 different directions. You have many different things competing for your attention and for your memory. So please don't depend on your memory, because if you do, you won't remember details that are going to be important when we think about things like, what step are you on in learning this skill? It's not only notes, though. Sometimes teachers will take brief videos of what children are doing, which allows you to revisit it, maybe take some detailed notes from the video if you would like, but also to have a combination of what the children are doing and how they're interacting. What sounds or words are they using? You can also take just an audio recording. Sometimes I like to take only an audio recording when I am focusing my observation on the development of language, because then I'm not distracted when I'm listening to it by action on the screen. So there are times when audio recording alone will be most beneficial. You also might collect work samples from children to keep so that you can compare what they did months ago to now. And that, in my professional opinion, is really the main reason why we would collect a work sample, for a comparison over a period of time. And you might have some checklists. There are things that would do well on a checklist. For example, if children are sitting at a table using scissors and you simply want to know, were they able to manipulate the scissors with their thumbs up? A checklist would work for that, because you can check off who did, who was able to hold the scissors correctly. But for more details, you need notes, video, something like that. So you can think about, in each situation, what collection of information would work best for me right now, so that later on, when you move to the next step of this assessment and planning cycle, you can reflect on details. I also want to make sure to point out that education is about the process of learning. Education is not about completing tasks. It's never about the task. And that's another thing that for years we did in early education that we emphasized. We emphasized completing products, but education isn't about a product. It's about the process of learning. If we think back to those things that I said we learn for a lifetime, we never end up with an end product. I never end up with an end product for something like managing my feelings. It's always a work in progress. And I think all learning is always a work in progress. We have to de-emphasize task completion and focus on the practice that children do to master skills. In order to understand that process, you have to know where the process ends up. There's an image on the slide of a child building with small, colorful blocks. It doesn't matter what the child builds. It matters the process, the thinking process that the child is using to create this. So when I'm watching a child who's doing something like building with small blocks or Legos, I'm going to be paying attention to specific skills like fine motor. How are they grasping these items? Language. What are they talking about based on what they've built? I'm going to focus on perhaps mathematics. If the child starts talking about the number of blocks or the colors, or if I ask a question about that, so that the child talks about it. I might take notes about social emotional development if there's more than one child who are using these materials. It's about the processes of those areas of learning. We make sure that our documentation, our collection of information, our documentation, sometimes called the data, is specific and points to the skills, points to those areas of learning and the skills that we want children to build. And then we sit with the notes, the videos, the audio recordings, the work samples, the checklists, and we reflect. Our reflection includes 3 questions. What skills does the child need to practice? What are the standards or objectives from this observation? And what does this observation reveal or show about the child? Imagine you are observing children who are using scissors, and you take a photo of their hands on the scissors. You take that photo later and you reflect on it. You can take a look and see where the children are in their fine motor development. Perhaps one child was holding the scissors thumbs up, as we hope they will, and snipping pretty successfully. Another child was holding the scissors with their thumbs down. That means that they don't yet have the coordination of their fine motor skills to hold it the other way. Maybe another child was trying to open and close the scissors with two hands. Each one of those children can continue to work on fine motor skills, but each one of those children needs me to plan something separate for them. So if I'm going to answer the questions that are on the screen based on that scenario, what skills does the child need to practice? Fine motor. What are the standards or objectives from this observation? You would go and look and see what skill level do we expect the children at the age of the children we're working with to be at. So for that, if I'm working in a room of 3 and 4-year-olds, I would expect them to be progressing toward using their fingers with the scissors, and probably expect some of them to still have their thumbs down. But just because that's within the range of typical development doesn't mean I'm not going to work on it. I'm going to continue to practice fine motor with them. So what does this observation reveal and show about the child? That the child is at this particular level of fine motor development. And so then I have to think about, what am I going to plan? And again, planning has 3 questions. What activities should be planned to support this child's skill building? If we were working with scissors, I'm not simply going to use scissors over and over and over again, because what I've realized is that the child needs to build fine motor skills. And the using the scissors is really evidence of their fine motor skills. We need to do activities, plan activities to support the child's skill building and fine motor. So I might plan activities using Play-Doh and sculpting. I might plan activities using tweezers. I might plan activities where we would have the children ripping paper to make a collage. I'm not going to give them scissors again for a while, because I want them to practice using those muscles and that coordination and see where it ends up. So question number 1 for planning was, what activities should be planned to support this child's skill building? Question number 2, what scaffolding should take place? Not everyone understands the word scaffolding. It is a buzzword or jargon in the world of education that isn't often explained to people. So I want to explain scaffolding to you in the way that I think about it and teach people about it. Imagine a building. A building comes to you with a basic structure, and you want to add rooms. So what do? We put up scaffolding to support the building and the workers. Children are the same way. I said earlier, they all come to you with a basic structure. And that structure was their experience, their culture, their family context, their biology. They all come to us from infancy on up with a basic structure. And what we basically want to do is add rooms. We want to start with what they already know, can do, and understand, and add to that. In that scenario, you are the scaffolding, because you are going to hold them up and support them while we attempt to add those rooms or that new knowledge to add to what they already know. We have learned over the years that we can't just come out of nowhere with information. We have to connect it to things they already know and can do. All learning is about connection. So you have to think to yourself, what scaffolding should take place? What can this child already do that I can be a jumping point for me to build this skill? Let's think about that child in the image who was building with those small, colorful blocks. The child seemed to be enjoying the blocks and was building with the blocks. So I know this child can build with and enjoys these small, colorful blocks. I'm going to use those blocks to build some math skills, because that's something I want to work on with this child. And finally, the last question for planning is, how can the family support this learning at home during their usual routines and experiences? And I want to emphasize the part that says during their usual routines and experiences. Families are far more likely to do activities at home that build children's knowledge and skills when it is a part of their everyday life. They're far more likely to do that than when we hand them an assignment. I've watched families when I was a program director, I've watched them take that piece of paper, and I know that they often feel like, and I relate to this as a parent, like this is an assignment for them. This is not an assignment for them. If I want them to practice something at home, it's because I want them to not only help to build skills, but to observe their children's skills. So I have to make it really doable for them. I will say to families something like, we're working on categorizing and sorting in our early childhood program. While you're sorting laundry, invite your child to help you put the laundry in different categories. I might say something like, we're working on one-to-one correspondence. The way that you can practice that at home is have your child help you to set the table. Or something like, we're practicing fine motor skills. Asking your child to help set the table and put out the forks will help to build those fine motor skills because the child has to use their hands and fingers to do that. So really think about the routines that families go through or the experiences they might go through, and don't give them an additional assignment. I've seen people say to families, we're working on our colors. So when you take a walk with your children, point out the different colors of the plants, the trees, the street signs. That's all that needed to be done. But I've seen people hand the families something on paper, another assignment having to do with those colors. We actually can leave it at next time you're taking a walk, next time you're sorting laundry, next time you're buying a certain thing like towels in the store, talk with your child about the colors they're seeing. Make it a part of the everyday routine. And here's one of the reasons why I put this, how can the family support this learning at home, on the plan slide. And that is because it should be part of the plan for the future. We often tell families the skills we're working on with children after we do it. We'll say to families, this week we worked on our colors. It would be great if you did that at home. Actually, it would be far more helpful if we say to families, 2 weeks from now, we're going to be working on these colors. If you have anything that are these colors at home, it would be wonderful if you showed them to your children. Let the families help you to lay the groundwork for the plan that will take place by pointing some things out to their children. But you have to phrase it very casually to the families so they don't think it's a test. Another reason why I want the families to do this before I execute the plan and not after is because I want their observations. I want to know what they've seen their children doing. I need their collection of information because children do different things in different places. Children will do things for their families when they're trying it out the first few times and they're not sure how it will go before they will bring that to us in our early childhood programs. The studies show that families report more emerging skills than educators do. So we need their perspective and we need to understand we're not home with them. We don't know what's happening there. Children do different things in different places with different people. So whatever they report to us, we accept it. We take their collection of information and our collection of information, and then we can have a conversation with families and say something to them like, I'm really glad you see this happening at home. Here's what we see happening in our program. And that way, both the educators and the families get a full view of the children. You know, people, when I say to people, and I ask this question often, why do we want the family's input? People will always say to me, because they're the experts on their children, as if it's a memorized sentence. Folks, they truly are the experts on their own children. And there's a simple reason for that. We see their children only in one setting with one group of people. They see their children everywhere else, in every other social setting, and in every other experience other than being in an early childhood setting. So their observations have to become part of our thinking and part of our planning. And then after we write that plan, after we get done planning, we respond, which is when we execute the plan. The cycle starts all over again with observing the skills the child exhibits while doing the planned activity. Let's go back to the children I was talking about who are using the scissors, and we realize we have to strengthen their fine motor skills. So we plan an activity that's going to take place 2 to 3 weeks from now where we are sitting with Play-Doh. For the child who needs to strengthen the muscles in their hand, I'm going to give them those dollar store scissors that don't cut anything but Play-Doh, and encourage the child to cut the Play-Doh with those plastic dollar store scissors to build muscles. For the child who needs more coordination, I might work on something like ripping, because that requires opposite motion. And I want the children to get some opposite and different motion in their hands. For the child who is already cutting with their thumbs up pretty successfully, I might give them something like taking that Play-Doh and making a specific form. So you have one child cutting it with dollar store scissors. I have another child ripping the Play-Doh, and I have another child who's making specific forms. And I execute that plan, which I can do with those 3 children all together if I would like to have peer modeling. Why am I doing all of that? Because I need to help children to walk the pathway to the goal from where they are right now, which brings me back to the assessment and planning cycle slide, which at the top says, collect information, step 1. Step 2, reflect. What did this information mean in regard to gaining skills, knowledge, and abilities? Step 3, write a plan that now has to do with the individual children, because you've collected information about them and reflected on it based on research-based standards and goals. And then finally respond by doing it. So in the example of fine motor, the response was to do different things with Play-Doh. And while they're doing that, I am once again collecting information. Why is this backward design? Because we are starting with the end. We are starting with what they should be doing. What do we want to see the children potentially achieve or head toward achieving? We're not starting with the activity. So I hope that this helps you to think about the children in your care and in a more individualized way, and to realize we can't ever go where we want to go if we don't tell the GPS where we're headed. Okay. I hope that you found this beneficial. Dr. Shipley.
Wonderful work. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And Cindy, you always do an outstanding job. That was a terrific presentation. We hope you will pick another session.